when we think of the CIA, our minds usually jump straight to the movies, right? Spies, gadgets, crazy car chases. But way beyond the Hollywood stuff, the agency has this very real, very powerful tool that presidents can use. It's for those situations where diplomacy has failed, but a full-blown war is just too much. Let's dive in.
So, put yourself in the Oval Office for a second. There's a foreign government causing major problems for American interests. You can't just send in the military, that could start a world war. And a treaty? That's completely off the table. So what do? What exists in that gray area between a handshake and a firefight? What's the third option? Well, that's where something called covert action comes in. It's basically the hidden hand of American foreign policy. It's a way for the U.S. to influence events around the globe, to shape history, topple governments, you name it, all without leaving any fingerprints, all from the shadows.
Okay, so to really get a handle on how these operations work, we've got to get the language right first. Because in the world of intelligence, believe me, words have very, very precise meanings.
So this is the official, by-the-book definition right out of U.S. law. And the most important part is right there at the end. The point isn't to hide the action itself. I mean, a coup or a bombing is pretty hard to miss, right? The real goal is to hide the fact that the United States was the one pulling the strings. It's all about plausible deniability.
And this is where a lot of people get tripped up, the difference between covert and clandestine. Think of it like this. A covert action is when everybody sees a building explode, but nobody can prove who pushed the button. A clandestine operation, on the other hand, is pure spycraft. Someone plants a bug in an embassy. If it's done right, nobody ever even knows it happened at all. Now, it's absolutely crucial to understand these aren't just rogue agents going off on their own. At least, on paper, they're tightly controlled. A covert action has to be greenlit by the President of the United States with a formal document called a finding. It has to serve a clear foreign policy goal, and it's absolutely illegal to use it to mess with U.S. politics or media. This isn't just about listening in, it's about actively changing what's happening on the ground.
All right. So that's the theory. Now let's see how this stuff actually plays out in the real world, because this third option has been quietly reshaping the globe for a very long time.
I mean, just look at this list. From overthrowing the government of Iran to the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba to arming rebels against the Soviets in Afghanistan, these are some of the most pivotal moments of the 20th century. So let's zoom in on one of these and see exactly how the pieces fit together.
So, back in 1954, the CIA organized a coup in Guatemala, mainly to protect the interests of an American corporation, the United Fruit Company. And they didn't just send in a bunch of soldiers. It was a really sophisticated, multi-layered attack. Yeah, they armed a small rebel force, but the real weapon here was psychological warfare. They set up a fake radio station to spread panic and disinformation. Then, they used just a few CIA-piloted planes to hit key targets, making the tiny rebel force seem huge and unstoppable. It worked. The democratically elected president was forced out, and a US-backed dictator took over.
The mission, in the short term, was seen as a major success. But that success came at an absolutely devastating price. The coup plunged Guatemala into a horrific civil war that would last for 36 years and would leave an estimated 200,000 people dead.
And that tragic outcome, that's the thing about these operations. There are always unintended, long-term consequences. In fact, the intelligence community has a specific name for it.
It's called blowback, and it's this idea that when you carry out a secret operation, the effects don't just stop when the mission is over. Those ripples you create can spread out over years, even decades, and eventually build into a tidal wave that comes crashing back at you. And you can see this pattern so clearly when you lay it out. In Afghanistan, the short-term goal was to kick the Soviet Union out. The long-term blowback, you get the rise of the very militant groups that would later orchestrate 9/11. In Iran, the goal was to secure access to oil. The blowback, the 1979 Islamic Revolution and decades of hostility. And in Guatemala, protecting corporate profits led directly to that brutal 36-year civil war. So this all builds to what is maybe the hardest question of all. With these kinds of catastrophic long-term consequences, how can anyone really say if a covert action was a success? Get this. This is just staggering. While they were planning that Guatemala coup, President Eisenhower actually asked his CIA director, Allen Dulles, what the odds of success were. His answer? About 20%, a 1 in 5 chance. And the president still gave the green light. That just shows you the level of risk leaders are willing to accept in that murky space between war and peace.
And then you have the view from inside the agency, from one of the main architects of Cold War covert action. Richard Bissell basically argued, look, you can only judge these missions by their immediate goals. Did you do the thing you set out to do right now? In his view, the long-term fallout, the blowback, that just wasn't the CIA's problem to worry about.
Which leaves us with this final, really unsettling question. If an operation works perfectly in the moment, but it plants the seeds for decades of violence, instability, or even terrorism down the road, can you really call it a success at all? That is the dark, complicated legacy of America's